Wembanyama vs KD proved us who's the #1 unicorn. If there's one guy in the NBA who knows what it's like to be a 7-footer who drills shots over any defender, it's Kevin Durant.
The league's really in trouble when he comes in. I want to see how it plays out, and everybody's been excited for his arrival to the league. So.
Yeah, I don't see anybody else in this game. I know we both skinny, and I'm sure he said he watched me growing up, but he's his own player person. He's gonna create his own lane. He's much different than anybody who's ever played.
And so, seeing the evolution of how he talked about Wemby 1 year ago versus after playing against him, one has to wonder, did this Wembanyama vs KD game show us who's the true #1 unicorn? Luckily for you, that's exactly what we're covering today. Let's get the obvious things out of the way. There's no need to introduce KD. The Slim Reaper has cemented his status over the last decade as not only one of the greatest players of all time, but also arguably the best scorer that this league has ever seen. A 4-time scoring champion, 2 final MVP trophies, 1 regular season MVP. I'm not here today to talk about his entire career, as his resume speaks for itself. If you want a guy to put the ball in the basket, chances are that you're not gonna find a lot of players better than KD at it. Because what's crazy about him is that he combines one of the best shot-making abilities that this league has ever seen with one of its highest release points. This gives us a guy who can score at will and who just cannot be defended. He can just come up at you every single time, jump, and you will not be able to block his shot. To many, he seemed like the ultimate big man, a player who would never be copied. Well, that's until the NBA met VICTOR WEMBANYAMA. Because on the other hand, while Victor may have just gotten to the front of the NBA scene, the hype that he generated has been like no other giant before him. I mean, how can you blame people? A 7-footer who can dribble and shoot like a guard, that's something you only see in the most outlandish 2K builds, but he's here and he's real. His first games in the NBA have been everything that was expected from him and more. This guy is not only a great basketball player, but also a true culture changer. The Spurs seem to be getting back into their glory days, and it's only been 2 weeks since the season started. Because more than stats, Victor has shown the poise that only all-time greats seem to have. Every single thing that he does on the court is deliberate. He doesn't force anything. I mean, he is still averaging less than 30 minutes per game and following Coach Pop's instructions to the letter. And speaking of listening, he seems to have no ego at all, and I'm not saying that in the bad sense of the way, quite the contrary. I mean, it's quite easy for anyone to lose their sense of reality and become cocky, especially if you spent the last few months of your life hearing about how important you are and how historic every single thing that you're doing is. But if his training videos with the Spurs have helped me learn one thing, it's that he's not scared to learn and not scared to say that he doesn't know how to do something. Now combine his willingness to work on his game with the fact that every single big Spurs legend want to help in his development, and you got potentially the scariest prospect in sports history. And even away from these charisma and leadership talents, Victor's offensive skill set is like if you took KD's one and put it on absolute steroids. After all, what helped KD become such an offensive juggernaut is his absolutely incredible release point. Now, what if you took it and added 5 more inches to it? This is the Victor experience, and add to it guard-like dribble moves and you got an alien who should not be allowed on any basketball court. I mean, when you've got the commentator going to God just by seeing Wembanyama's dribble training routine, then you know that something is up.
I think that's really boded well for him here early on.
You know, defensively, I think he could impact the game without any...
Not only that, but this is just focusing on what he does best and what distinguishes him from the other players already in the league. Because if we add to his bag everything that a center should be able to do, there's no possibility stopping this behemoth of a player. Just imagine him having a consistent post-up game. How could you stop him from getting to the basket? Oh, and let's not forget about his defense. Because as much of an offensive juggernaut as Wemby is, his defense alone is more valuable than probably what 90% of the players in the league have to offer. Now, obviously, by virtue of just being tall, he could make a good rim protector. The thing is that good is not enough for our French rookie. After all, he showed it but chose to spend the entire offseason with the Spurs staff instead of going to the World Cup with France. And that would show in his body. As compared to the draft, he took on more than 15 pounds of pure muscle, and most of it being core strength. This helps him not only being a better rim defender by providing him with a stronger body to hold off any center or big wing that wants to take him on, but he also developed his lateral speed enough for him to be as big of a threat even on the perimeter. And obviously his two-game duel against Kevin Durant. Victor has never hidden the fact that KD was one of his idols growing up and that he was one of the big inspirations for his game. So seeing him not only play against him but also get the win in both confrontations between them is definitely a fairy tale coming true. In the two confrontations between the Suns and the Spurs, it seems like one thing was clear to everyone. Wemby is the future and the present. We all know that the Spurs just got out of a full season of tanking, so despite the Suns not having Beal or Booker, there's no reason for them to not be winning against a rookie who just discovered the American game. This rookie had other plans though, and 38 points and 10 rebounds in the second game with Booker back on the squad were exactly that. In just his fifth game and in a nationally televised game against the Suns, Victor just casually decided to drop a better career high than a legend like Bill Russell. He also made sure to completely shut down the Suns' rim presence. Of course, they lost Aiden for Nurkic this offseason, but that wasn't enough reason for Wembanyama to stop his efforts. He would end up averaging 3 blocks per game over the two confrontations and led the Spurs to those 2 wins. His team needed him to step up, and he did just that, dominating on every single facet of the game, offense and defense, and bringing 2 important W's to San Antonio. Now, when it came to the few one-on-one duels that they had throughout the game, KD still made sure to use his finesse and experience that he had accumulated over the years to show Wemby his place. He would dominate him time and time again and completely overpower him in numerous offensive sequences.
Wembanyama takes a swipe. Clock ticks to 2. The shot clock. Durant up and over. Wembanyama.
After all, Kevin Durant is one of those players who made a living out of embarrassing the best players in the league, and it's not a 19-year-old rookie who's going to change that no matter how generational he is. Because when you look at it a bit more closely, you realize that Victor is not dueling with KD, or with any other player for that matter. He is instead battling history. I mean, this guy has scored the most points by a player in his first 5 games since 1976. It seems like he is set on writing new pages in the NBA's history books and take our league straight into a new era. After all, with LeBron's retirement slowly approaching, and don't get at me in the comments, I know that the guy is still great, it's just that old age is still there, and when his time comes up, someone has to take that throne and become the new face of the league, all while taking it to new heights. It's not the first time that a player has been labeled as a unicorn by NBA media. Most have flopped, while a few others like KD have been able to use their talent to the fullest and leave their mark on NBA history. But Wemby has taken this unicorn status and turned it into something that he can use to potentially become the greatest player in the history of the sport. The real question that we have to ask ourselves is if he can one day prove to be the best NBA player ever. Well, that's what I think at least, but what about you? Do you think that the 2020s are going to be Victor's decade, or do you see someone else in the league taking that crown from him? I would love to hear your comments on this subject down in the comments below.